right, back to chapter 9. We're talking about body weight and obesity and BMI and things like that. And so we're going to continue with this. I'm not sure if we'll finish chapter 9. There's kind of looking at this whole stuff. It was actually really hard for me to put it all together because there is so much. You could probably break this entire unit into about 3 units. And so I organized it the way I thought fit. I know it's a little bit different than how the textbook organized it. And there's some areas the textbook does a really deep dive into that I've kind of touched on lightly, and kind of the other way around. There's some areas that I've gone into a little bit deeper on. And anyway, it is what it is. If there's something that you're interested in a lot more detail, certainly there are many resources out there. You can start with the textbook. And, if there's something that you feel that was kind of missing just at the end of the semester, I'd love to get some feedback on the course, as this is the first time through, and just trying to figure out, how much to focus in each area has been a little bit of a challenge. Like I said, there's so much out there we could talk about with nutrition and bodies and those kind of things. So this is about where we finished off. We had talked about, indicators for where you might be concerned about your health risks and in terms of where your body is at. And these are kind of the 3 indicators that are often used. So we talked about body mass index. That's basically how tall you are compared to your weight, and that's it. And of course, that's not going to fit everybody. Some people have lots of muscle. Pregnant women may weigh more than they normally would when they're not pregnant. Elderly people, their BMI is really indexed for somebody around age 25. So it's not going to be really that suitable for young children and those kind of things. Although there are different scales for children that are starting to get used now for BMI and whatnot, but it's not bad. Some people like the waist circumference. It's really easy to measure. You just get a measuring tape. And I can't remember for women, but for men, it's around 40 inches and bigger. That's where they start to say, well, we want to be a little concerned about that visceral fat, that belly fat, because that's the more dangerous fat to have. And then the other one here was disease risk, and kind of looking at, okay, you are overweight, but let's take a look at the rest of your health indicators, because there are some people that are considered overweight by the BMI, but they're actually relatively fit. Some people just have a heart, they have different bodies, and they have, maybe they have fat around the body, but not necessarily that bad visceral fat. So, you look at things like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea. Those are kind of the big ones. If you have any one of those kind of things and you have a high BMI, then they're looking at considering, okay, we should have some good intervention there. And then there's a bunch of other indicators on that list, and all the usual things like hypertension and things like that. So anyway, that's about where we left off. I think I had this other slide here on BMI, and you can take a look. I think the textbook kind of defines these a little bit more in detail, and in terms of where you're at. But you see this value all over the place, right? And I know when I went to the doctor's office, I'm trying to remember, I can't even remember what I went for. I went last fall, and they took my height and weight, right? And I'm sure that immediately they probably looked at a chart, and in terms of where my BMI is. And so that normal BMI, it's a good number to remember. So about 18 to 25. I kind of remember that and think about, when you're an adult, you become, when you're 18, you become an adult. And, some people say at age 25, it all goes downhill. So I don't know if that's a good way to remember it or not. Some people are very good at remembering numbers. Some people are not. I like numbers, but I'm not always good at remembering them. So I'm always looking for memory games to figure out how I can store that information in my head. Okay, so on to new stuff. Look how much fat is ideal. Again, everyone's different, but these are kind of the ranges that are usually cited in a lot of studies. And these are for, again, kind of that ideal 25-year-old individual, right? And not necessarily true for everyone, right? Males about 10 to 20%, females about 20 to 30%. Females need extra fat tissue for being pregnant, for human reproduction over men. And of course, if you are some sort of elite athlete, your numbers may be much lower. A lot of male athletes, elite athletes, their body fat percentage is like in that 5% range, which is just kind of crazy. Some people are, like I said, we've got different sizes and shapes of bodies and whatnot, and those kind of things. But these numbers are, like I said, sort of ballparks. And you can see it says here, the numbers are slightly higher for ages 40 plus. Again, these numbers are kind of calibrated for younger people around age 25. So what I want to talk a little bit about today, and we'll see how much we cover, is basically around gaining weight and losing weight. These are kind of the themes around today's lecture. And there's so much that could be said about that. But let's start off with the simple part of this, is that it's all about energy balance. Now, it's way more complicated than this, but on a very basic level, the body is going to try to balance its energy in most circumstances. So that means that the food, the calories that you take in, so that's going to be your food and drinks, and if they're equal to the energy that you expend, then you're going to maintain weight. Okay, and I'll get into some of the complexities as we go on here, but I just want to talk about this for a bit, and we'll come back to this little diagram here in a minute. In terms of energy intake, we've been talking lots about food, so I won't get into that. Calories, right? Energy expenditure kind of fits three categories, and you can see I have some percentages here. Where are the percentages? There they are. Okay, I don't know why I animated that. So the biggest one is BMR, and I'll come back to that in a second. That's basal metabolic rate. And then the other two, so maybe 25 to 50%, depending on how active you are. So physical activity, that doesn't just include exercise, it includes really anything you're doing above and beyond sitting on a couch and breathing. So, getting up to make dinner, walking to the washroom, all the way to actual exercise. So we call that, sometimes people call that physical and voluntary activity, right? And there's also the TEF, which is the thermic effect of food. So what does that mean? It means that when you eat, your body actually ramps up its metabolism for a bit and uses energy to break down that food. So you can sort of think of it as two things, right? One is the energy that's required to break down food. So you're creating enzymes, you're swallowing and pushing the food through your intestine and all of those kind of things. And the other part is like I said, the increased metabolism part. So let's just talk about BMR for a few minutes here. So BMR is basal metabolic rate. And this is kind of the amount of energy it takes you just to basically stay alive, right? So it includes all of those processes that we don't really usually think about: breathing, your heart moving, your production of new proteins and enzymes for your body and those kind of things. And there's tons of things that affect your BMR. And you can take a look. The textbook has all of these things in there, and they kind of describe what's going on in a ton of detail. I'm not going to go into all these. Obviously, everyone's body is different. Some of the common things: younger people have a higher BMR than older people. For example, if you are a taller person, usually your BMR is higher because you have a more surface volume compared to a smaller human. If you have a fever, your BMR is increased. You're metabolizing faster, those kind of things. If you're starving, if you're malnourished, your BMR goes down. Your body goes into a mode where it's trying to save itself. So all these things affect BMR. Something you may hear about a little bit is this hormone here, thyroxine. So this is a thyroid hormone. A lot of people love to talk about their thyroids. And so the thyroid is basically a gland, and it's kind of in your neck. And it's really a key metabolism regulator, in that it actually secretes a number of hormones that have things to do with your metabolism. And so thyroxine is something that the more you secrete, the higher your BMR. I don't know much more about it than that. I just know it's kind of one of those key metabolic hormones that either speeds up your metabolic rate, or if you're deficient in it, then your BMR slows down. So something that's kind of related to this energy balance that we talked about already in previous units and was part of assignment 2 is this estimated energy requirement. And there's a few formulas out there for estimated energy requirement. In fact, I showed you this exact slide before a few units ago, and there's a calculator there you can go to. And it basically looks at your age and gender and height and weight, and how I think this calculator asks you, how active are you? Not at all, moderate, very, or something like that, which is not very specific. But anyway, this is really just an estimate, and it's based on probably some sort of model individual. And so the further you get away from that model individual, the less accurate it's going to be. And a lot of people say these things, are maybe up to 20–25% error, inaccurate, but it's kind of a ballpark anyway. So I just want to come back to kind of talk about that for a moment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about weight gain and loss and how this is done. So like I said, on one kind of principle, this is very straightforward, and we have lots and lots of data to show this is exactly the case. That if your calories eaten equal your calories burned, you're going to maintain your weight. If your calories eaten are less than your calories burned, you're going to lose weight. If your calories eaten are greater than your calories burned, you're going to gain weight. And this is it. We know this for sure 100%. Now, unfortunately, there's so many complexities, right? I know some people are thinking in their head right now, they're thinking, well, why is it that, me and my friend, or me and my sister, or somebody else, you seem to be eating the exact same thing and doing the exact same kind of exercises and routines, and why do I seem to be gaining weight and he or she seems to be losing weight, right? And this is where the complexities are, because if you go back to the last few slides, talking about BMR and things like that, we've got so many different variables going on, and I'll probably not even touch on half of them in this unit in terms of things like hormones, and sometimes it's the little things too, and I'll get into some of that again here in the next little bit here. But generally, this is the case. And notice there's nothing here about exercise. We'll talk about physical activity, because you can obviously burn you can burn calories through exercise. And I'm not discouraging you from exercising. But that being said, there are people that exercise a lot and still have a hard time losing weight. And this is one of these kind of anomalous mysteries out there that I think we're just kind of beginning to understand with some of the research. And I'll kind of come back to some of that a little bit later. I'm going to talk about weight loss at some point here today. All right, so before we talk about weight loss, let's talk about weight gain. This one is pretty straightforward for the most part. If you overconsume nutrients, you're going to store those nutrients, right? So we've already talked about these things. Glucose, you can store a certain amount of glycogen in your liver and your muscles, and any excess glucose we're going to convert to fat. Excess protein, some of it will be converted into glucose, some of it will be converted into fat, and so here you go. You've got storage systems. Fat can be stored. Your body's very good at storing fat. And all these are not bad things, as we've said before, particularly in human history. People would go through seasons of feast and famine, and storing a little extra is not necessarily a bad thing. Alcohol we talked about as well. And I was reading a little bit more about alcohol metabolism recently and learned something kind of interesting, is that apparently alcohol will actually slow your body's use of fat. So it's actually can make you fat in two ways, in that excess alcohol can be stored as fat, plus it slows down and inhibits your body using its stored fat. So not so much fun anyway. And we also talked about alcohol being often stored in the visceral fat, and so that you've got those beer bellies and things like that we talk about a lot. Another thing to say about weight gain is that there are reasons for weight gain. Some people are underweight. Some people are malnourished. There's lots of reasons for weight gain. Some people are trying to gain weight. They're trying to gain muscle mass. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I think in the next unit, we're going to talk a bit more about physical activity and exercise and whatnot. And that's a big one, right? And you see that, around, I would say, I don't know, grade 10 or 11, you see a lot of boys being very interested in suddenly, they want to gain weight. And, so they're starting to research all the protein powders and they want to work out and figure out those kind of things. So, weight gain is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think there were more than one of you during the assignment that had mentioned that you feel that you're underweight and that you're trying to gain a little bit of weight and you want to do it in a healthy way, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about muscle gain. I think it's in the next unit anyway. But how do you do it? You eat more. And at least, it's easy to gain fat. Gaining other things is a little bit harder to do. Last thing I was going to say about this, I was reading about celebrity methods for gaining weight for roles, and there's some pretty gross methods out there. And then others that don't sound so gross. I was reading about one actor who was trying to gain 40 pounds for some role, and he was basically buying the Haagen-Dazs ice cream, melting it in the microwave, and drinking it like chocolate and milk, and getting an extra 2,000 calories a day that way. And I was like, that sounds, at least that's a fun way to do it. Not that I ever want to gain weight for something like that and then try to lose it. It just sounds like an awful thing to do to your body. Okay, so kind of back to some of these things we were talking about. I said I want to get to in a bit more detail. So energy balance, we know that for sure. And I'll say that I was reading about a really fascinating study about, there's always that question, I said, where you have somebody else in your life and they seem to be eating and doing exactly what you're doing, but they're getting completely different results. And there's actually been a few really good studies in the last 10 years to kind of show that, when you get down to those details and you measure someone's BMR and you measure their activity levels, there's a really cool study they did. I can't remember where they did. I think it was Stanford. And they they called it the magic underwear. And it was these suits that went all over their whole body and measured every single muscle movement they could measure with these sensors. And they had people, studied for like a week, and the people had to eat all their meals, all their calories in the lab. And so every cornflake was measured in terms of how many calories were consumed. And they found some massive differences, right? You have two people that think they're exactly identical, but they're not, right? So two people have an office job. One person will sit there for 3 hours straight at their computer. The other person, gets up every 10 minutes. Some people squirm in their seat. Some people will take an elevator for one flight of stairs. Some people will go up and down this flight of stairs. Some people run up the stairs. Some people go slowly up the stairs. And when they were able to measure these micro differences, right down to the BMR and things like that, they found that they could account for the weight lost and gained. Of course, why is it that all of those things are happening? And this is kind of the big mystery around it in terms of, why is it that, I squirm in my seat and you don't? Those kind of things we're trying to understand. If you look at obesity studies, there are so many of them, and they're connecting it from things like birth order to postal code to all sorts of crazy things. And you can see there's a list of them there on this slide, and trying to, understand what's going on. And when you have something like this that has, hundreds of variables, right? How can we help people? And that's kind of, the big question, right? And what can we do? And so we're kind of going to get into this a little bit. I saw this cartoon here. I thought this was kind of funny. You can see we've got some eyeballs, and that little guy in the middle is the stomach. And he says, we can't just eat a whole pie. We just can't. And the eyeballs are saying, oh, we can, and we will. And so this kind of gets into talking a little bit about the physiology here. So hunger, appetite, satiation, and satiety. Okay, those last two words, we probably don't use them in conversation very often, but we'll talk about what they mean here in a moment. Let's talk about hunger and appetite first. So I think most of us have a pretty decent idea what hunger and appetite are. Usually most people kind of clump them in as being somewhat of the same thing. They're not quite. Hunger is a physiological signal, and it's telling us we need to eat. And usually it's kind of unpleasant. Okay, so it's that, your stomach is and there's a whole sorts of things going on, right? Your stomach could be gurgling, so you can feel that it's empty. There's hormones that are interacting with your brain, and all these kind of things going on, and it's like an itch. It's like, I'm hungry and I don't like it, right? That's what hunger is, right? A whole bunch of things affect hunger, obviously, if you haven't eaten in a while, right? So maybe 4 to 6 hours, your body is looking at, what kind of nutrients are in the blood, like blood glucose and things like that. There's nerves in your stomach that can feel if it's full or not. And there's a whole bunch of other things like, hunger can be influenced by the weather, or sex hormones, or illness, physical and mental illness, right? How many of us, when we're sick, we're just not hungry at all, right? So there's lots of variables with hunger. Appetite, on the other hand, is more like it's a psychological thing, and there's all sorts of things that can kind of prompt appetite. So just picture, you're not hungry at all, and you walk into a store, and you can smell the deep aroma of some, some baking, or you smell some pizza, or, something like that. And suddenly you're salivating and you're thinking about eating, right? And that's what appetite is, right? Kind of a little bit different than hunger. And sometimes appetite can come or go, right? For example, if most humans, when we smell vomit or see somebody throw up, our appetite is it's gone, like instantly, right? Some people, at the dinner table, I'm pretty famous for being able to talk about anything at the dinner table. But I have family members that say, please don't talk about that. I'm losing my appetite, right? And so appetite is kind of like hunger, where there's kind of physiological things going on, smells and hormones. Some of it is learned preferences, right? For example, I don't know what it is about certain foods, but you have these connections with them, right? So it's like, it's a certain summer day, and I just feel like I gotta have a hamburger, right? And so, there's all sorts of connections with holidays around foods and those kind of things. And of course, again, appetite can be affected by illness, right? Typically when you have a cold or a flu, your appetite kind of decreases, and those kind of things, right? So these two things, I guess I've talked enough about them here. There we go. These are kind of like your go signals for the most part, right? When we're talking about eating. And so we can also talk about stop signals, and that's where the satiation and the satiety come from. And so if you take a look at these, they are two different things. Satiation is kind of the feeling of fullness, that as you're eating, right? So at the beginning of your meal and you're hungry, you know, your part of your brain is just focused on getting that food in, right? You know, particularly if you're really hungry, you know, you're shoveling it in, and then you start to eat maybe slower, and you're getting satisfied, right? It's like, okay, I've got the food, I'm good. And that's what it is. And again, you've got all sorts of organs involved, particularly the stomach is part of it. The stomach can have a full feeling if you put a large quantity of food or liquids in there. But there's also things going on in the blood and the small intestine and the brain, you know, and generally that takes a few minutes once you start eating. And so one of the things I always tell people, and it's just, you know, polite manners too, is to eat slowly, right? If you eat quickly, you're probably going to be able to fit a lot more calories in than you'd like to. Satiety is kind of the next step in that sort of the lingering feeling of being satisfied after a meal, and that kind of, you know, will last, you know, kind of for most people, it's sort of in that 4 to 6 hours range. So about the amount of time most humans have between meals. Now, two things to say about these things, and you can see one of them I have here in bold. I forgot to mention is that appetite can override hunger. So we can, due to our appetites, we can undereat or overeat, right? We can mindlessly eat because, you know, we associate watching a hockey game with eating potato chips, let's say, right? Or the other way around, you're too caught up in the hockey game and you forgot to eat supper. You know, those kind of things can happen, right? The other thing is that hunger tends to outweigh satiety, right? I mean, we have a physiological need, and that's kind of important for most part for our survival, right? So I just wanted to kind of talk about two hormones for a moment that often come up, and these two hormones, it's kind of interesting when you look into the research on these things, because you see a lot of food and nutrition sites will say, you know, lots of things about them that are for certain, but when you kind of delve into the research, we're still trying to understand how these things actually work. Because if you think about it, we've got two hormones, one that is telling us to eat, one that is telling us to stop. You know, one would think you could just give people these and that would change everything. And we've had some tiny amounts of success in animals, but in humans, we don't seem to be getting anywhere with this. So here's kind of how they work, right? Before you eat, this ghrelin hormone is called the hunger hormone, and it's produced mostly by your cells in your intestine. I think it is produced by other tissues, and it goes to the brain, the hypothalamus, and says, we're hungry, right? The hypothalamus, remember, is dealing with appetite and those kind of things. And so it gets produced, and this is usually, sometimes I see in some literature, they call it the hunger hormone, right? Leptin is on the other end of things. Leptin is appetite suppressing, and this is made by your fat tissue. So as you eat and you start depositing into your fat tissues, leptin can get produced. I'm not going to go into any more detail on these kind of things, but I'll show you one study that was done in mice. And you can see that, like I said, there might be some promise someday with trying to figure out if we can regulate these things in humans. So in this case here, you can see both of these mice are they're genetically bred for obesity, and I don't really know what that means, but these strains of mice probably tend to overeat, is probably what's going on. But the one on the left, they actually genetically removed the gene for leptin. And so it stopped overeating, whereas the one on the right tends to overeat. So, you know, there's something here, definitely. And, you know, maybe someday we'll figure out how to deal with these things. But, you know, again, humans are always looking for easy fixes, aren't we? Okay, so I was just going to show you this thing from the textbook, and it's just talking about, you know, all these complexities that go along with hunger, appetite, and those kind of things. So you can see here's your empty stomach, and in this case, you know, you're going to be making that hormone. Can never seem to remember. I think that's how I spell it, ghrelin. And you've got, these signals that say, hey, we're hungry. And maybe you see some food. And, so over here, we've got our hunger. And then you start seeing food or start thinking about food. And then you start building up an appetite. And, that's kind of what happens, right? And so you start eating. And, that's going to, for most people, it gives you a little bit of satisfaction or something like that, some sort of feelings around it. And eventually you're going to start to get some physiological signals that you've eaten enough. And, you can see it's talking about stomach is triggering, there's receptors in your stomach that tell you that you're putting stuff in there and it's getting more full. And so the sensation you're starting to get here is being satisfied, which the word is satiation. Go. And then, you're digesting for a while. And so your body is telling you that it's good. It's good for a while. And so the term for that is satiety. Like that. There we go. Anyway, you can take a look at that. That's just kind of the details of all that stuff I've been talking about for the last few slides. One other thing that is good information to know is what foods are going to satisfy us. And it turns out protein is a good one, particularly protein that has fat in it. Study after study has kind of identified that as something that is going to help you to feel satisfied. These things digest relatively slowly, and so that kind of helps. And generally, protein has a lot of nutrients in there. Not just protein, but fat as well. And so all of those things kind of contribute to it. Other foods that contribute to that satisfaction feel are things that may linger or add volume to the stomach, right? So fiber is one that is going to do that. It's not digestible usually, and it's absorbing liquids from your intestines, and so it's adding volume to what is going on in there. Other foods that are high in water, or even foods that are puffed up with air. So I'm not sure what category of food that means. The one I keep thinking about is like Cheetos and cheesies and those kind of things. And if you don't chew them very well, then they're puffed up with air. But you can imagine lots of foods might have air and volume to them. And so those are some things that kind of some tips for people that are trying to have a full feeling is make sure you get a little protein in there. That's going to help you out. And fiber, of course, always fiber, 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 fiber. We're never going to stop talking about fiber all semester, but for good reason. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about causes of obesity. Like I said, we know for sure that, that energy balance is the thing, right? And, but, there's so many questions around the nuances of this, right? And these are the things, right? Is it overeating or is it lack of physical activity? And, the answer is it's complicated, and it's probably different for different people. Definitely it has to do with that calorie balance. And, but how can we get there? And what is going on with obesity? So we kind of want to talk about this a little bit here. And there are multiple causes, we'll say, and you can kind of think about them as inside the body and outside of the body. And I'm going to touch a little bit on all of these. And this is an area where the textbook in some areas has gone on in a lot of detail. For example, these metabolic theories, right? And these metabolic theories, there's a whole bunch of different theories around what is going on in the body. Trying to understand it, why is it that some people, their bodies are using calories more efficiently and have a thrifty metabolism versus other people that seem to just, their metabolism is ramped through the roof and they're eating like crazy and they seem to burn those calories crazy. So there's a whole bunch there. I'm not going to go through them all. I was just going to mention one as an example, one of the ones that is kind of one of the leading examples is called the set point theory. And this theory kind of states that somehow the body wants to maintain a particular weight, right? And so if you're lean, your body wants to stay lean. If you're heavier, your body wants to stay heavier. And so it's hard to fluctuate from that set point. I don't know a lot about most of these metabolic theories, although I've heard of many of them, in terms of the nuances and the details and the physiology, it's something I felt we either spend a minimal amount of time on it or we spend a whole lecture on it. And I think there's just a point where I had to kind of cut my losses and say, if you're interested, check it out. There's a lot of debate about these theories in the research. I'll talk about genetics in a minute and your microbiome. I told you I was going to come back to the microbiome. Well, let's just talk a little bit for a minute about kind of outside of the body things, which again, you know, what's inside, what's outside of the body, it doesn't really matter. They're all intertwined. But I guess by outside of the body, it means things that we might have more control over, right? So you can see external cues, price, availability, psychology, right? Some people are depressed and they might eat comfort food, for example. You know, those kind of things. And I'll kind of touch on some of those here in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about genetics. This is an area that I do know quite a bit about, and again, didn't want to kind of get into all the massive amount of details on this. But there's a couple of things to say about genetics. One is that there are a few types of obesity. They're kind of on the rare end where it's almost exclusively a genetic cause. They're lacking a certain gene or have an extra allele of something that is telling their body to store fat in a different way. And these are relatively rare. But that being said, there are, I'm trying to remember the study I was reading about. I think it said at least 30 genes connected to obesity in some way. But there are a lot of people that kind of fit into this category of they have some predisposition towards obesity, but it doesn't mean they're going to be obese. And you can see this number here, right? Looking at these kind of genetic studies, right? If you have one obese parent, then apparently you've got somewhere between a 40 and 70% chance of the biological child becoming obese. So that shows there's a connection there. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, but they're in the same household, eating the same things, doing the same activities. So yes, there's an environmental thing going on there. And it's not 100%. But if you take a look at this second note, there's studies looked at adopted children, right? And you can see this note here. It says adopted children. Now, I couldn't find a percentage without spending a bit of time diving into the literature. But generally, adoptive children, in terms of their body weight, tend to be a little bit more like their biological parents and less like their adoptive parents in terms of body weight. And so that shows there is a good chunk of that genetic inheritance that can help you out with this kind of thing, or work to your disadvantage, I suppose. You can see that last note. Twin studies are great too, because identical twins are like an experiment. You've got two people that are identical in their DNA, and we can take a look and compare them to, say, fraternal twins. Fraternal twins are just like normal sister and brother, where you've got about 50% of the same amount of DNA, and you can tease out the details there, and you can see that identical twins apparently are twice as likely to have similar weights than their fraternal twins. So this is all data that shows that there is a genetic component to it. Like I said, the one paper I was looking at said there's about 30 genes that have been identified that may contribute to it. And they range from all sorts of things to like genes that are associated with your thyroid, to genes that are transporters of nutrients across your intestinal cells. And a lot of them, we don't really fully understand what the nuance is in terms of what is going on there. These are the kind of things that, 10 years from now, if I'm giving the same lecture, maybe we'll have some better answers. Who knows? I was going to talk about our microbiome again. I showed you this image quite a while ago now. And this study was done quite a few years ago now. I'm thinking around maybe 2006 or something like that. And what they did here is they took basically a fecal sample from an obese human versus a fecal sample from a thin human, and they colonized the mice with those fecal samples, right? So you're basically doing an intestinal microbiome transplant is what you're doing with these mice. And they found that the mice that were infected with the gut microbes of obese humans became obese mice. So this is like, we've been talking about this now since whatever year that was, 2006 or whatever. It's been going on for years, people trying to look at this. And we've done these kind of studies in humans. It's kind of funny to think about this, right? You're eating somebody's feces, but they put in a little caplet or something like that. And initially, when they started to do these studies, they thought they were going to have a hard time finding human volunteers. But when it comes to people's body and people are trying to improve it, people will do anything. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? These things they're cleaned and they're inspected for diseases and whatnot, and they're done in a very laboratory kind of setting. And to see if we can change the flora, change the microbiome of people who are clinically obese. And the answer is like, we don't know. A few people seem to have some effects that you could actually see that you can change the gut microbiome of some of these people, but it didn't seem to have a lot of effect on their body size. So we don't really know what's going on here. There's so many variables to deal with your microbiome. We've known for a long time that obese people and thin people often have different microbiomes. We've known that certain diseases, so obesity, I believe type 2 diabetes, maybe fatty liver disease, I can't remember. There's a bunch of disorders that are associated with having a less diverse microbiome, right? Meaning that there's less species in the person's gut, and that seems to correlate with having certain diseases. But the question is, which came first, right? The obesity and then the microbiome, or the microbiome and then the obesity? And it's probably, again, it's one of these things that's probably super complicated. I don't think this is going to be a winner in terms of changing things. Maybe it will help people, but again, probably the standard things of people having a better diet, getting exercise, and behavioral therapies are probably going to be the real answers to this whole thing. But anyway, this is something I keep reading about, and it's super fascinating, and I can't stop reading about it because it's so interesting. Let's talk about external cues for a minute. To overeating, we talked about all of those. All of these things are intertwined, right? We've got availability of foods, right? So there's lots of studies that show when things are cheaper, people buy more of it. Studies done with vegetables. There was a study done, I can't remember where this was. And they subsidized the produce in a grocery store to see what would happen when they dropped the prices a significant amount. And no kidding, people bought more carrots and broccoli and all those kind of things. There's lots of studies that show when there's a larger variety, people tend to eat more. There's all the restaurants and the food industry knows all about what colors to use in a restaurant to increase make you more comfortable, increase appetite, and those kind of things. And that's why restaurants are rarely painted baby blue or purple, because those colors actually apparently suppress appetite a little bit. And you've got all of the other human psychological things going on: loneliness, depression, addiction, compulsion, you name it. It's very, very complex. And all of these things can affect your physiological signals and tell you to eat or not eat at the right or wrong times, right? And like I said, I could go on about this for a while, and it's probably worth a good psychology course. The other thing, of course, we've talked a little bit about is things like goes back to like postal code and our infrastructure and things like that. in terms of what is available to us, right? I go to McDonald's and, what are my choices here? You can order a meal and there's a lot of calories in it, much more than apparently people had in the 1950s. So, in some cases, what does that mean? I order the Happy Meal? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of something that we're trying to think about, and you go, depending on where you live, right? You could be living in a downtown area where, everywhere you go, there's McDonald's and Wendy's and who knows what else, and not enough healthy options and those kind of things. But anyway, like I said, these are things we could talk about for forever if we wanted to. And I think I probably have said more than enough for now about these things. I want to talk a little bit about physical activity, because this is certainly, there's a lot of studies around physical activity and sedentary behavior and how these things can change. And actually, coming out of the pandemic, I'm willing to bet there will be some interesting research on this kind of thing. I know for certain myself, this pandemic has really affected my activity levels. And I've become a lot more comfortable with being sedentary, and it's really, really bothered me. Why is it that it's so much easier for me to sit down for 2 hours straight? It could be age too, but I'm just going to blame the pandemic. There's lots of concerns about kids nowadays and screen time and, what kind of activities they're involved in. I think it's the responsibility of every parent to be concerned about the next generation, of course. But there's very good research to show that over the last 100 years, the amount of activity we get has decreased majorly. 100 years ago, how many of our ancestors were farmers? I have a stat here. It says here that 100 years ago, 30% of the energy used in farm and factory work came from human muscle power. Today, it's about 1%. So now today, people are working wherever, and you're not actually doing much physical in your job. Now, in some cases, that's not true. I know some of you have jobs where you're probably on your feet 6 hours a day, but now contrast that with somebody who isn't. And, these things can have a huge effect. I've known tons of people that have changed jobs, and because of just changing jobs, they have, gained or lost weight. I had a friend a few years ago who was a very happy office worker type of guy, very happy with sitting down and being at an office and self-confessed donut lover, et cetera, et cetera. He got laid off. And for a few months, he ended up working with one of the gas companies, being the guy who goes and reads the meter, right? And so he went from, maybe walking 4,000 to 5,000 steps a day to, I think it was something like 20,000. And his health and his physical fitness improved dramatically just over 6 months. It was really incredible to see his change when he realized, how sedentary he had become in his 30s. There's some notes here about, sometimes people are looking at losing weight or maintaining, or sometimes people are building mass. And we're going to talk about that in the next, I think it's the next unit anyway, in terms of those kind of things. But those are two different goals, right? Sometimes people want to lose weight or maintain their weight. Some people are actually actively looking to change their body composition. So burning fat and gaining protein, of course. Okay, so a couple of other things here, and then I've got, I think I have a Kahoot coming up here in a moment. So just a warning for you. I was hoping to do a little sooner. I know that just me talking constantly, probably some people are totally falling asleep. So I'm trying to put the Kahoots in there to wake people up. But anyway, this is from the textbook. I thought it was really fascinating. There's a little bit more detail in the textbook, but it's talking about energy spent in different activities. And it's kind of surprising there. I didn't realize that vigorous bicycling would be the most energy intensive activity on the list. But you can see golf is on there. So if you carry your clubs versus riding the cart, running and studying, swimming different speeds and those kind of things. I point out swimming because I used to swim a lot of laps, and you can certainly go at a very leisurely pace, and you can see the difference between going at a leisurely pace and putting in a bit of effort. So 18 meters a minute and 45 meters a minute. I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, and there it is. There's a Kahoot. So load up your app and let's do a Kahoot. Loading up the pin. Seconds to join. Be found on the screen in the bottom corner if you join late. Okay, so I have 6 questions. Number 1, which area of the body does excess fat represent a greater risk to health than excess fat elsewhere on the body? On most of you, the abdominal area, so that visceral belly fat is the stuff that we don't like. And if you remember last day, we were talking about a little bit in that it tends to release cholesterol a little bit more readily than subcutaneous fat. And so this is why there seems to be the biggest risk around affecting your cholesterol levels. Which of the following groups is prone to develop the apple profile of central obesity? So the correct answer is men of any age. So the apple profile is the one where you're kind of all round, particularly in the central area around the belly, right? The pear shape is sort of that typical woman who has roundish hips. And so it's the apple shape that we're concerned about because that has lots of visceral fat. And so generally men of any age are at risk. And you can see that there's a lot of guys in their 20s and 30s that kind of have a gut. Women at any age who have it are less likely, they're likely to more develop it typically after menopause. And so there's many women who are kind of that pear-shaped that are kind of at a low risk of certain things. And then, when they kind of hit menopause and their body changes shape, their risk level goes up a little bit. Doesn't mean that everybody with the apple shape is in a high risk, but it's kind of, there's a correlation between that because of the visceral fat. So men of any age is the correct answer. Somebody's sad, but you're doing so well. Number 3, why do women require substantially higher amounts of fat tissue than men? All right, everyone got that one right. So thought that would be an easy one. Thought I'd throw it in there. What is the name given to the psychological desire to eat? So the correct answer is appetite, and I spelled appetite incorrectly, but 10 of you still got it anyway, so well done on that. So hunger is a physiological need. So it's more in the body giving you signals that you need to eat. Appetite is psychological, meaning your brain is saying, hey, I want some pizza because that smells really good. All right, sad face still in the lead. Number 5, which stomach hormone, along with a contracting stomach and an empty small intestine, triggers hunger? Ghrelin. The other one is leptin. Leptin is the one that tells you you're satisfied, that you're not hungry. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Don't know if there's an easy way to remember that. Question. When coupled with obesity, which of the following is an indicator of an urgent need for weight loss? Apnea. All of these other things have their concerns, but there were 3 things that are coupled with obesity that were the biggest concerns. 1 is type 2 diabetes, 2 is cardiovascular disease, and 3 is sleep apnea. So generally, if you have any of those 3 things and your BMI is high, you're considered in a high risk category. And high risk meaning, life or death kind of thing. Sleep apnea is where people have basically breathing problems while they're sleeping, and so that is a big deal. And in many cases, people who are diagnosed with sleep apnea, the very next thing they're told is, you need to lose some weight, and that might get rid of the problem, and because you do want to breathe properly. Okay, let's see who did well on the podium. Number 3, Claudia. Yay! Well done, Claudia. Number 2, smiley face. Smiley face was on a hot streak. And the gold medal, unhappy face. So turn that frown upside down. Haha, hopefully you like my jokes. Okay, so let me just see where we are with the time. Okay, so we're doing okay. Still a little bit of time left here to cover a few other things. And I want to talk a little bit more about, I guess, obesity and losing and gaining weight and some of the physiological stuff around this. So like I said, we know for sure that, if we look at our energy input and output, if there's an imbalance, then you're going to be gaining or losing weight. Of course, how do we do this is always the question. And this is where all these diets and fads and things can come from. And so let's talk about that a little bit. You can see on my slide here, it says, with exercise, moderate calorie reduction, and a balanced diet, a body will use its stores of fat. And this is generally the best advice to get. It's not easy advice. Even small changes can be a big deal. And this is something we'll get into. I think we'll probably not quite get into it all today, but behavior modification as well. But generally, this is what we want to do. If we're trying to lose weight or get a little leaner, we're trying to burn a little extra energy, a little more than we actually take in. So like I said, easier said than done, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit about the physiology of these things. We already talked about this part, what happens to our food when we eat and we overeat. And so we can call that feasting. You can see it's showing we've got your carbohydrates. Your carbohydrates can be stored as glycogen or fat. Your fat can be stored as fat, and your proteins can, I guess they're not showing it getting converted to glucose in this diagram, but ultimately when you overeat, some of that energy will be stored as fat. And if you're building muscle, I guess you could throw that in there as well. But let's talk about what happens when you eat less than you need to. When you eat less than the calories burned. So this is called fasting, and fasting doesn't mean for a long term. Fasting can mean, short term or anything like that, right? And so generally what happens when you don't have food currently in your intestine or something like that, or if you don't have enough in there to fuel for what your body is doing. Your body is going to draw on its stores. And for the short term, your body is going to draw on the glycogen stores, and the glycogen is found in your liver and your muscles. So your muscles make sense because that's what we're using to move around, right? So, you're running, you're going for a run, and you want the energy right there where the muscles are. So that's great. At some point, you're going to start drawing on your other reserves, your fat. Now, this is a little bit slower to get going. Glycogen is kind of like it's ready to go. It's a good energy source for that reason. Fat, it's going to come. It's just going to be slower. All these things are going to provide you with a little bit of energy. Now, here's the thing, right? We have only a few hours worth of glycogen in our body. And if you're doing vigorous exercise, you're going to deplete it a lot quicker, right? So I think, again, it's 4 to 6 hours or something like that, of glycogen. And what happens when we start to deplete it? Well, most of us have a little extra fat, okay? And that's not a problem. And we can use the fat to make energy. But here's the thing, right? Remember, we were talking about the brain and how the brain requires glucose. And if we don't have glucose in our blood, we have no glucose because we're out of glycogen. Our bodies do not have the ability to make glucose out of fat. So we have to use protein. So protein can get broken down to amino acids, and amino acids can get converted into glucose. And so where do we get our body protein from? Well, our skeletal muscle, and all over the place, really, depending on how long you're fasting. If it's just a little bit of fasting, this usually doesn't necessarily get there. Or if you're taking, let's say you're 200 to 300 calories less than your energy requirements, this is going to be relatively minimal. If you have a good amount of protein in your diet and things like that, this is not usually a big deal. But if your fasting goes long term, if you fast for, I think it's more than about 24 hours, you're actually starting to break down your intestinal lining, and your body's starting to break down proteins in the blood, immune proteins, and fasting beyond that can go quite severe. Now, there's a lot that could be said about fasting. There's a lot of indications that show that short-term fasting, meaning 1 or 2 days, may have some benefits to the body. There's a lot of claims around it cleansing the body and things like that, and I don't even know what they mean. Honestly, they're claiming that you're detoxifying and things like that. Your liver detoxifies your body, not fasting. It's just, there's a lot of weird claims around fasting. And there's some people that do short-term fasting, meaning they're skipping a meal and those kind of things. And there's diets based around it. And I'm not sure how well they work. Some people swear by them, but generally most people who skip a meal, when they get to the next meal, they're hungrier. There's lots of studies that show that, people who skip breakfast, for example, you're extra hungry at lunchtime and things like that. It may not be true for you and may not be true for everybody. But that's kind of generally the case. And so I'm always skeptical of those kind of diets where they tell you to skip a meal and do things like that. But again, I don't really know a lot about them. That's why, so I'm not going to comment any more on them than that. I think, hold on, I think I actually have another slide here. Yes, okay. Just dealing with fasting and gradual weight loss and those kind of things. So this is generally where, if you're trying to lose weight, that you want to be, right? You want to be relatively gradual. And we'll talk about what that means. I think we're going to get it to today in terms of number of calories and things like that. But generally, most of us, depending on the size of your body, you don't want to be more than about 300 to 500 calories less than your energy requirements is where you're at. And because you don't want to be losing muscle mass as well. There are lots of people that have gone on like the Weight Watchers programs and things like that. There's all sorts of calorie counting programs, and they're very focused on losing a certain amount of weight in a certain amount of time, and they do, but they become weaker because their muscles actually have been depleted a little bit, and we don't necessarily want that. Like I said, short-term fasting, is something that is different definitely from long-term fasting or famine. The big thing is just trying to have glucose for the brain is the big thing. You can see there's a note there about these ketone bodies for feeding the brain. So long-term fasting, we were talking about ketosis a little bit. Ketosis is where fats are made into ketones. And there are certain cells in the brain that can use these ketones. And so that's why your body is doing that, but it still needs glucose. You still are going to break down protein. And so this is why these ketogenic diets and things like that can be relatively risky to try to figure out, try to find that balance and whatnot. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later as well. And another thing about the ketones is it can affect the acid-base balance in your body, makes your blood too acidic, which can have, if you're starving, this can have all sorts of other physiological effects on your body and whatnot. I thought I was going to say something else about fasting. Another thing about fasting as well, is if you're kind of up in this category and, maybe combining a little bit of exercise and whatnot, you can lose fat. But when you kind of get into the fasting category, one of the problems is the body is realizing it's fasting. And so it's saying, okay, we need to conserve energy. And so it's going to slow down your metabolism. So that's something, if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to get to that category as well, because, when your body is slowing its metabolism, it may also slow down your energy levels and things like that. And we don't want to do that. We want to feel alive. We want to feel good. So I don't encourage fasting, although some people do it for various reasons, spiritual reasons, and those kind of things. And I'm not going to comment on that too much. I know people that have done that with different results, and it's certainly a very interesting conversation. So notice I have a star here. Excuse me, I just got a frog in my throat. I need to remember to bring a glass of water to lectures. So I have a star on this slide. I want to talk a little bit about best strategies for weight loss. There's so much that could be said about this, and this is kind of from a bunch of different sources. I've kind of the textbook has a little section on this, and it sort of has a good summary here. And all these things are things to consider, and you can see that. Well, we'll talk about some of the kind of common themes around these things. So one is realistic goals. And there's a lot of research that shows that people do not necessarily have realistic goals. You're 40 years old and you think you can get your body to look like what it was when you were 20. I don't think so. There's a lot of people that are in heavy categories and they make great progress and they're still unsatisfied with their body. There's all sorts of things like that. One thing that can be said about realistic goals is that a first goal may actually be stop gaining more weight rather than losing weight. Okay, so that's, like people, they say, what do they say? Baby steps and things like that, right? Be realistic. And that's a good way to accomplish your goals, is to have accomplishable goals, right? As opposed to things that are, you're never going to get there kind of thing. What's number two? Number two is keeping records. This is what a lot of people do, and that's, they use that MyFitnessPal, or there's about 1,000 of these calorie counting activity things. MyFitnessPal, I chose that one specifically because there is an app and a web-based version. I was looking at other versions. There's a lot of other apps that are much better, I thought, than MyFitnessPal, but they didn't have a web-based system where you could get the nice reports. But there's Weight Watchers, there's subscription programs, and really the big thing about keeping records is to kind of just spot your trends and identify ways to do better, right? A lot of people are not aware of the amount of calories in some of the foods they eat. I know I've done the nutrition tracking a few times now in my life. There's one point where I did it for about, I think, almost 3 months straight. And it was super illuminating, looking at things like, I keep coming back to croissants. I had no idea, right? croissants to me were like, I'd eat 2 or 3 of them in any sitting. And some of these things apparently have 300 calories. And I'm like, I had no idea. And so this is good. And spotting trends, right? In terms of something that I've become aware of, well, actually I've known about it for decades, is that I am an evening snacker. But looking at the trends of snacks, what am I consuming? What are the high calorie ones versus the more moderate calorie ones? And I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but between ages 20 and 30, almost every single night of my life, I would have a massive bowl of ice cream around 9 o'clock in the evening. And there was a point where I realized, this is great, but probably should stop doing this. And so, I still eat ice cream, just not nearly as frequently. And I think a little bit more about how much I'm having. Like I said, when I say massive bowl, it was quite a bit of ice cream I was eating at the time. What else do we have here? Planning what you eat. A lot of people who plan what they eat, you can think around healthy choices. Excuse me, I just really lost my voice. But planning what you eat, you can make healthy choices versus just going to the cupboard and opening up and grabbing what is convenient. Generally, when we don't plan what we eat, we start to migrate towards high calorie processed foods, and meals aren't necessarily balanced. What else do we have in here? Thinking about energy density and nutrient density. This is something we were talking about earlier on in the semester, and I have some examples that I'm not going to get to today. But we want things that are nutrient dense and maybe not energy dense if we're trying to lose weight. And like I said, we'll get back to that next day here. Another thing too, a lot of people, when they try to lose weight, the big focus is on cutting calories, but they're not thinking about getting the nutrients that they need. In many cases, some people can actually lose weight by barely cutting their calories, but they're getting a better balance. They're getting less saturated fat, more unsaturated fat, a little more protein in their diet and things like that. And it's giving them more energy. And so they may be eating a similar amount of calories, but because they have more energy in their life, they're expending more energy and doing more things. Meal spacing, again, there's good data to show that people who take small, more frequent meals, not skipping breakfast, things like that, there's a lot of data to show that helps a lot of people. And being aware of portion sizes. So we talked about that a little bit. Just looking at the time, we're almost done. I just kind of wanted to, and moderate exercise, and we'll talk about that next day here as well. But I want to finish off on this slide here, because this is pretty good. Now, this is from the textbook, and you can see on a lot of nutrition websites and dieting plans that these numbers aren't always exactly the same, but these are not bad targets. So the big one I'm looking at, for example, is the first one here, right, for calories. So the question is, how many calories should I reduce in a day? Okay, and this is where there's debate about. So you can see people that are greater than BMI of 35, they're saying 500 to 1,000 less calories in a day, and people with BMI of 27 to 35, and maybe I even copied that incorrectly. But if your BMI is in this range and you cut your diet by 1,000 calories, my opinion is that's too much. 1,000 calories is a lot. Many of us, some of you in my class, I noticed you're shorter, smaller, skinnier humans. Your day is probably, 1,600 calories total, right? So 1,000 calories is quite a bit. I've seen other numbers that show, people kind of in the just overweight category, that they're saying, in the 200 to 500 range is kind of what you should be looking to cut down. But anyway, I'll have to double check to see if I got that wrong from the textbook or not. How much fat, saturated acid, fatty acids, those kind of things. And so, this is what, and all these nutrition sites and Weight Watchers and MyFitnessPal, when they're looking at goals, they're usually basing it around, some standards such as the Canadian Food Guide. But they all have different tweaks. There's one of the apps I was looking at that had several different plans that you could look at. And they're looking at trying to, just losing calories versus trying to become, more lean and more muscle. And so they all had slightly different tweaks around these things to try to encourage you to eat in a certain way and whatnot. Okay, so I think I've definitely talked more than enough for today. I'm losing my voice, and it looks like we're basically out of time anyway, so I'm just going to stop there, and I'll probably come back to this slide here and comment on it again next day. So that will be on Friday, and it looks like Friday we will be back on Zoom. So hopefully everyone has a great week, and I'll see you on Friday. And hopefully by then we'll have an update on the internet cyber issues or whatever is going on at the college.